So why don't we turn it over to Jan and Ellie if you want to get started. So Jan Ronis, I've known for a long time, a few decades maybe. We're that old.
Mm-hmm.
We went to grad school together.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always really fun to see you, Jan, and welcome.
Oh,
Thank you so much for doing this for us. And
Mm-hmm.
please tell us about what's been going on with BDRC.
I don't want to take up too much time with introductory statements, so just want to acknowledge that there's a lot of old friends here, and I hope that we'll be able to catch up in person soon. But I want to make a special mention of two of BDRC's directors. Andrew Quintman, Professor Quintman is the president of the board of directors, and then Lauren, who co-organized this event, is also on the board of directors. So thanks a lot for your support from the leadership of BDRC. And then Ellie, is listed on the website as technical lead, but he really is so much more than that. That title doesn't really encompass everything he does. So I just wanted to mention he's the visionary behind the really complicated but very functional data architecture, so sophisticated. He brings a lot of linguistic insights to his work, and he's also the head of, informally, partnerships and collaborations. And you'll see how this new platform we developed was built in order to make really advanced collaboration partnership possible to benefit the field and also to expand the archive. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. I'm going to turn off my camera. All right, everyone. So we are here to talk about BDRC's new platform. And so the name of the platform is, it goes by the acronym of Buddha, the Buddhist Digital Archive, but it is the product of the Buddhist Digital Resource Center. It's our home base. And so, we'll get into the relationship between the two soon enough, but just to clarify that. Oops. All right, and so, we should remember our founder at the beginning of this presentation, E. Gene Smith. He died almost exactly 10 years ago on December 16th, 2010. So, many of you know this legend of the field, born in 1936 in Utah. His contributions to Tibetan culture and Tibetan studies and Buddhism is really a play in two acts. He, had two major projects that have been so impactful. The first is the PL 480 program to collect Tibetan texts. It's written about in Curtis Schaefer's introduction to Gene's book of essays among Tibetan texts. But essentially, while he was working with the Library of Congress in New Delhi, he was able to find a creative way to use State Department funds to jumpstart an economy that would support the reprinting, publication, and widespread distribution of Tibetan texts that had recently been brought over the Himalayas by Tibetan refugees and were in very precarious conditions. So without the scale that he was able to bring to the text preservation effort in India in the 60s and 70s, the tradition might have many less texts in its extant libraries. So we're all very grateful for him. And then years later, beginning in the late 90s, he utilized a whole new generation of technology to digitally reproduce all of the texts that he helped preserve and many others. So we're all very grateful for Gene, and we miss him. This is a lovely picture of him that Sadra, or rather Lhotse Foundation, shared with us. All right, so there's many ways to approach the new BDRC website. One would be to compare it to the legacy site. So if I could just spend 2 or 3 minutes giving you kind of a fresh look at the website, which many of you have probably used many times for years, I think will set the stage for what for some of the priorities we had when developing the new platform. So tbrc.org, it has a slow search engine, something everyone is very patient about, but I wanted to point that out. It was something we wanted to overcome. It gives you unranked search results, which, you know, people who are pretty knowledgeable about Tibetan studies can sort of overcome on their own. But if you are new to the field and you search for somebody like Losang Trokpa, you know, Tsongkhapa, you might be expecting that his person record is going to come up at the top of the list. It doesn't. It's way down the list. And that's true for many other of the most famous individuals in Tibetan studies. It's simply because the search results come back unranked. And so that can lead to a lot of missed connections, so to speak, when searching for texts and persons. Then you get a lot of noisy search results. So if you see here, I did a search on Tusam Chuling. Well, it just turns out that there is no monastery called Tusam Chuling. So, you know, maybe no results should have been returned, but instead you get things like Samten Chuling. That is, you know, not a close match at all. And so this is the kind of noise and general set of problems that our users have been so patient with over the years, but which, you know, we wanted to eliminate as we move to a much more modern web platform. Then the image viewer is really deficient. It was developed in 2010 and was never updated after that. Then there's a wonky interface. Just this weekend, I received a email from a grad student at UVA who was having trouble. He said, you know, I don't know why the PDF download isn't working. It's only giving me the first 20 pages and the last 20 pages. Why is that? And I thought, okay, that's strange because the text is completely open access. That shouldn't be happening. The first 20 and last 20 pages are shown only when a work is copyrighted. So, what's the problem? So I went to tbrc.org. I looked at this very familiar interface, which I've used so many times. And I looked at it sort of objectively and I realized, oh my gosh, there's 3 different download links. Of course, that's confusing. So he was pressing, I imagine, sample PDF instead of full PDF. Well, you know, anyone can be forgiven for not knowing the differences between those 3. So we wanted to eliminate that sort of thing from the new website, and we did. I'll show it to you. And then perhaps most fundamentally, TBRC, the database, not just the website, but the database itself, has a very idiosyncratic data structure that's really not suitable for a multi-tradition archive or for data sharing with partner resources. And as I tried to explain in the, I think 3-paragraph description that I wrote up for this event, you know, one of the impetuses behind developing our new website is that it was needed to accommodate BDRC's new mission. As we moved from TBRC to BDRC, we moved from working on Tibetan texts alone to the entirety of the Buddhist literary heritage. And so we needed a website that could accommodate different languages and traditions. So that's tbrc.org. Now, I just wanted, before moving on to Buddha, acknowledge that the new website was funded entirely by the Ho Foundation. And so that's a nice kind of, you know, tendril that we have here today, because this presentation is taking place at the under the auspices of the Ho Center at the University of Toronto. All right, so the Buddhist Digital Archives. So this is the interface, and you get to it at library.bdrc.io. And so this is what you see sort of above the fold, but if you scroll down, there's a nice new feature, new scans released this week. And it shows you thumbnails and the titles of all the newest texts that have been not just acquired by BDRC, but actually fully uploaded to the website. Okay, so let's go over some of the nice new features that I think all of you will enjoy. The first is search results that come back in a ranked fashion. So for instance, if you type in Ngmpp, the first result will be the Ngmpp that everybody thinks about, Ngmpp Sonam Rinchen. And so we were able to accomplish this ranking by developing a popularity index. And so that's a nice development, something you see on other sites, and we're now bringing it to Buddhism. But popularity is not the only way that results can be ranked. It's the default, but if you want to look for closest matches or year of birth, that's now possible. You can also do it in reverse order. And the ranked search results are also possible for things like texts. So you can search, if you search on a title, the default will be popularity, but you can also look for closest matches or even year of publication. So that's pretty cool. Here I just did a sample search on Selwe Melong, which is such a popular poetic title in Tibetan texts. The Gyalrap Selwe Melong is probably the most popular text in the Tibetan canon to have that poetic title, and so it appears first. But this also gives you all the other texts with that string in the title. All right, and then another aspect of Buddha is that we now have people search on individual facets. There's several reasons for this. One is to reduce the time it takes for search results to be returned. Now, over the weekend, some of the people in attendance today kindly sent us questions and sort of topics and issues that you wanted addressed today. One was about how can I find texts on emptiness? And so one way to begin this is to search on emptiness under topics. And then that will lead you to all of the texts that have been labeled as, or that have been marked as dealing with the topic of Tongpa Ni, of emptiness. So faceted search results. And when you do a faceted search result, it might seem like we are, limiting you, so to speak, putting your search into a silo. That's not the case at all. If you look just to the left, so this was a detail, but if you look at the full screen, you'll see that to the left, every other facet that is also relevant to a particular search will show up. So Tongpa Ni, there's one topic dealing with Tongpa Ni. Okay, fine, but there's dozens of texts underneath it. But there's also many works that have Tongpa Ni in the title. There's many e-texts that have it in the content. And so you can easily navigate over to those lists of records without having to do a research. So the facet is not a limitation. It's not meant to somehow, prevent people from exploring the full panoply of text that we have. It's just meant to streamline things. So take a look at that, or keep that in mind when you're doing searches. Now, there's much less noise in the search results on Buddha. So I gave you one example earlier of noise. Now let me compare a search, one on TBRC and one on Buddha. So Palden Yeshe is a fairly common name in our database of persons. If you search on Buddha, Palden Yeshe, you get everybody who has that name in that order. Palden Yeshe, and so there's 8 people that will be returned under that string. But on tbrc.org, you get the Palden Yeshes, and then you get a bunch of other stuff. Ganden Yeshe, Tokten Yeshe, Kalden Yeshe. Those are totally irrelevant. They should not be showing up. And so we've eliminated those noisy searches from from Buddha's search results. I think that'll also help people avoid tangents and false positives. Okay, we also have a state-of-the-art image viewer, which has been garnering a lot of positive results. It gives you, crisp, full color images when the BDRC images are themselves full color. It gives you full width viewing, scrolling vertically, and then you can also see thumbnails of every page in the text so that it's easy to peruse a text. You might want to look for a break or the beginning of a new title within a volume, things like that. It's fantastic. Here's another detail. You can zoom in, you can scroll through the pages in various ways using the buttons or using your mouse. And it also offers image manipulation tools in case you want to change the contrast or highlight a particular color. You can even do a black-white reverse. It's wonderful. And then we've sort of solved the download image problem. Now there's just a single button, download images. You won't be confused by it. E-texts. So tbrc.org did have a number of e-texts, and I, for one, benefited greatly from the full text searching within e-text that was possible on tbrc.org. I used to teach classical Tibetan, and the e-text search on tbrc.org was my best friend when I was looking for examples, real world examples of particular terms or grammatical particles and so forth. It was fantastic, but we were repeatedly asked for the ability to download entire e-text or even just to read entire e-text on the site. That wasn't possible in tbrc.org. It is now on Buddha. And not only do we, make it possible for e-text to be downloaded or read, but we can also align images with the corresponding e-text. And that's because of a partnership that we have with Google, a really fruitful partnership that has allowed us to run a majority of the Tibetan texts in our archive through Google's very accurate OCR engine. Some other features of e-texts are that, well, you can, here's the faceted search on e-text. So if you type in something like, Drepung Chuni, then you see a bunch of results, including a little bit of context. So this is what you'll see when you first get the results. But then there's many other options here. You can expand on the context to see, 3 full pages from the e-text, or you just press open in e-text. And then furthermore, when there is more than one occurrence of your query in a given e-text, you can see all of them at once by clicking on other matches. So, and here we see now on one simple screen without a lot of extra noise, the 3 things you're looking for so that you would know exactly where to go in the text. Click on the hit that's most relevant to you, and off you go with your research. So the e-text component to Buddha is really advanced, and I know that all of you will make great use of it. So that's what I wanted to say for now about Buddha's sort of basic features. We'll do some live test drives later on based on the queries that some of you suggested to us in advance, and also based on questions you have during the Q&A period. But before we go any further on the practicalities of using Buddha, I think it's important now for all of us to understand its advanced data architecture. And this is largely the brainchild of Ellie, as informed by the newest standards in library science. And so let me stop sharing my screen and hand it over to him.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to share my screen. Here it is. Yeah, I'm going to present the architecture of Buddha and also the new data and some of the new features of the model that are important to navigate the new website. So first, in terms of technology, the new website is based on linked open data or semantic web. So instead of our old idiosyncratic data model, we now have developed a data model that we hope we can share and that other projects can use. And through a shared data model and data format, we can exchange data much more easily. And so the consequence of that is that we can, when you search on Buddha, you actually search on multiple data sets. So we have partnerships with other institutions, and what we implemented is what's called a Federated Search. So every time you search on Buddha, you actually search on multiple databases. Yeah. So that's for the data itself. Now for the images, we are using a protocol called IIIF. It allows us to do two things. One is to present images on our website that are hosted by partner institutions. And also it allows anyone to embed our images on their website. And so it's a very important standard that's used now by museums, libraries, art galleries, etc. So it really allows us a lot of partnerships that are now made very easy by migrating to this technology. So the way it looks like in one direction, so here's a screenshot of the Dzongsa Khyentse Chokyi Institute website. And so what they have is, so this part of the website is actually the Buddha image viewer. And so they created this collection of texts for their Shedra. So it's organized by year. And so they have this outline view, and then they can view the images from the website directly on their website for their students. So that's one direction. And another is that we have partnerships with, for instance, the British Library. And we display their images on our website. So I'm going to give an example of that. But yeah, basically we don't have a copy of the images, but they appear seamlessly on Buddha as if they were BDRC images. We just have a British Library logo so that it's clear that they're not from us. But anyway, so we imported different collections from the British Library and also other that I'm going to detail in the next slide. But from the British Library, we have quite a lot. We have one Sanskrit collection of 235 manuscripts, 4 Bhutanese collections of 2,500 volumes, and some Tibetan texts from Amdo. It's 1,200 texts. So yeah, just to show you what it looks like. So when you're on Buddha, so I'm going to demonstrate after that how you can reach this page. But basically, when you're on Buddha, you will see this image viewer. And so these images that you are seeing are hosted by the British Library. So we had this logo here. And then you can scroll through the images as if they were from BDRC, basically. So this is quite convenient, and we have partnerships with other institutions as well. So we have some texts from the Cambridge University Digital Library, 185 quite rare Sanskrit manuscripts. From Internet Archive, we have 32 scans from the Hodgson collection, so which are Sanskrit texts from Nepal. We have 300 scans from the Waddell collection at the Staatsbibliothek zu Berlin. 1,500 scans from the Van Manen collection from Leiden. And we hope to have in the near future some scans also from the International Dunhuang Project. So all these scans are accessible, like when you search a title, and you have a match in this collection, then you can stay on Buddha and just view the images, etc., as if they were from BDRC. So this type of partnership is quite important. And we also have another type of partnership which doesn't involve images, but only involves the catalogs. The by far largest catalog import that we had is the Ngmpp Catalog. So it's from the Nepalese German Manuscript Preservation Project, where they photographed 30,000 texts, Tibetan texts on microfilms, plus about 40,000 Sanskrit and Newari Buddhist texts, also on microfilms. So although we have a few scans, like we have about 300 scans, we have imported the whole Tibetan catalog, and so this creates more results. And so when there's a text that you search and it's not on BDRC, at least you know that it's available in this collection, even though we don't have the images. So for this type of partnerships, we have a few partners. Like one is the Gretil, so it's the Sanskrit e-texts. We have about 620 links that are discoverable on Buddha. Treasury of Lives, we have links to their collection, the 84,000 Wikidata. Sakya Research Center provides quite a lot of new data because they have person records and place records about persons and places that we don't have in our database. So you can find some matches in their database. We also imported Marcus Bingenheimer's bibliography of translations from the Chinese Buddhist canon into Western languages. Also we have some links to VIF and WorldCat. So as this is quite new, I'm just going to present quickly what it is, because you may not be interested in clicking on that, but it actually is quite important. So this is the person record for Shantideva. And if you click on Open Resource in WorldCat, what you're going to see is all the texts by Shantideva that have been cataloged by the biggest libraries in the world. And so most of them are the translations in Western language of different works that he wrote. So when you want to see, what translations are available of some of these texts, then you can click on that and you have, this nice list of translations in a lot of different languages. Okay, we also have some new data from the Chinese Canon. So we have imported two different things. One is the Dila Person Authority Database, which represents about 40,000 person records. So when you search in Chinese on Buddha, you can find hits in this database. And we also imported the outline of the Taisho Tripitaka. For each text in the Taisho, we have links to CBeta and SAT. Plus, we have a partnership with SAT where they provide us their images in IIIF. So you can see the images from the Chinese Buddhist canon from the SAT images. So yeah, so basically when you are on the Buddhist canon, on the Chinese canon, you can browse this outline. And so for each text, you see you have links here to CBeta and SAT. And you can see, and you can read the scans from SAT. So sometimes they're a little bit slow. And yeah, this display is a bit, yeah, anyways, we'll look at that later. And something quite important is that for each canonical text, both, I mean, from the Tibet and the Tibetan and Chinese canon, we have indicated the parallels between the Tibetan, Sanskrit, and Chinese. So when you are on a Tibetan canonical text, you can see the parallels in the Chinese canon and also in the Indic words, works when we have them. So one such example would be
yeah.
By the way, now you can search in Sanskrit or Pali without the diacritics, and if you select Indic, you will find results. Oops, that's should be an A. No. Well,
I think you searched on English.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Yeah, that's better. So here you can see that there are matches with the diacritics. And by the way, you can see here that this is the Sadhana Pundarika from the British Library. This one is from the Cambridge University Library, etc. But so if you go on this and you go on the work, you can see the parallels in the different languages. So here, this Indic text has a parallel in this Tibetan text, and it has 3 parallels in the Chinese canon. And so if you click on one of these, on this parallel, for instance, you can see the translations in Western languages that come from Marcus Bingenheimer's bibliography. And you can see the origin of the information when you put your mouse somewhere. There's a little pop-up that says where it comes from. Yeah, so yeah, that's quite an important import that we created, and that we hope will be the start of more partnerships in the East Asian studies. And finally, before I make a more I don't know, concrete demo, I just want to introduce the new model that we're using, because it's quite important to have it in mind when you browse the new website, as it's quite different from tbrc.org. So it just concerns the bibliographical parts, not like the persons, places, etc. They don't really change. But for the works, I mean, for the bibliographical part, we now have one entity type that's called work. And the main attributes of the work will be author, or topic, language, etc. And then we have a different type of entity that we call version. And the typical properties of this entity will be like the publisher, the scribe, the printery, etc. And there can be several versions for one work. So this means, like, if we go back to this example that I took, where it is, where is it? Yeah. If you go to the Sadhana Pundarika work, you can see that we have all these different versions. And there are different manuscripts or different prints, etc. So that's very important. And also we have 2 new types of entities. One is the scans. So scans is actually, you could say, a subtype of version, but it has some specific properties such as scan info, where we got the scans, who provided them, when the scans were made, etc. So that's the typical kind of properties that you will find there. And we also have this new type called e-texts. So, I mean, it's not really a new type, but it's conceptualized in a different way from tbrc.org. And so an e-text version, if you want, will have some properties such as, who created the e-text and how. Is it an OCR? Is it a manual input, etc. And finally, there is one entity that didn't exist at all on tbrc.org. I mean, so it's the item. So it's like the physical, the properties of the physical thing, like in which library is it, or which museum, or which monastery, etc. And maybe it can have also a shelf mark in the library, etc. So I'm just going to show what it looks like on the website. So oops. So if you search the biography of Milarepa, for instance, here you will find, so by default, what you're searching is in the versions. So here you can see the new search results, which have these nice thumbnails. And so if you click on this result, for instance, you will go in this display, which has 3 tabs, one for the work, versions, and scan. And here, for instance, if you go to the work, you will see all the other versions of this particular work that we have. And you can see like the properties will be like the language, so it's in Tibetan, the creator, like the main author is Drepung Chen. There's a short summary in English, the topic, the genre, etc. And for the version, you have a little thumbnail and you have the different titles that are indicated on the physical object. You have the publication date, your publication name, location, etc. I mean, you can see for that. And for the scans, you can see this thing that we used to have on tbrc.org, but it wasn't displayed on the website. But now you can see the origin of the scans. So it was scanned in 2014, apparently in Cambridge. So yeah, that's a demo for the bibliographical model. And so in conclusion, so Buddha is still a work in progress. We still are quite focused on the development, but we certainly hope it's usable, and we encourage you to use it and give us some feedback. And the future priorities will be the annotations of records and generally more user engagement. So that you can, comment on a record or request a change or indicate like maybe there's a typo somewhere or add some notes, etc. And also in another level, which would be that we have sometimes some duplicates in the, I don't know, we have 2 records for the same person or for the same place, the same work, etc. And so we want to have some sort of crowdsourcing for that to allow users to send some feedback on that. We also want to implement the search on multiple terms, which is something that we got in the feedback to prepare this demo. So basically what it will probably be like is that you will have a sort of plus button here, and you can add one term here and another term, etc. You can add as many terms as you want. Something that we will start to work on early next year will be to improve our Burmese catalog and have a search engine that works well for the Burmese language. So yeah, don't hesitate to send us some feedback, if possible negative, so that we can fix the problems. But positive feedback is good too. So yeah, that's the end of the presentation. Thank you very much. So I don't know if we should make a demo or,
Well, yeah. So since we have 10 minutes before the end of this segment, I was thinking to do some live demos based on queries and issues that were shared with us before the meeting. Great. Okay, so let's do that. All right, then maybe I'll share my screen.
Yeah.
Again, thank you, Ellie, for that. Wow. I hope you were able to appreciate the the sophistication of the new website and how it's already been able to integrate at a very sophisticated and deep way numerous different data sets and how much potential there is for BDRC and for the field moving forward as more and more institutions and partners start to use this shared model. And so let me share my screen to show a couple of searches. All right. So go back to here. Share. All right. So people asked some interesting questions about, you know, searching on places, searching on people, and so forth. And so let me kind of walk you through a few of them. And I'll just point out at the beginning that some of the ways in which this can be used have to do with, you know, understanding how to use the new search interface. But then other ways to profitably use BDRC have to do with more kind of qualitative ways of figuring out how to refine your searches. And so I'll try to show how these two things kind of work in tandem. So in other words, sometimes you have to just, you know, get better at using the protocols, and then at other times you need to learn how to, you know, modify your searches to try to bring back other results that didn't come up the first time around but are still relevant. So someone's asked about this place in Amdo. So we'll search on Gangsa under places, Tibetan Wylie. All right. And so you'll see that the top record is for the county. So that should be, you know, relatively pertinent here. And then there's a number of monasteries that are in Gangsa. But let's go to the main record here for at least the modern county. And so you get the Chinese, the Pinyin, and take a look at our logos. We put a lot of work into our new logos. This one is kind of cute. You know, it plays on the pin that you find in so many maps, but then it adds some Buddhist and Tibetan visual elements to it. So the variant labels, the different ways in which this place is named. What is it? It's a county. Where is it located? So what is it located within? And then what does it contain? And it contains all of these different monasteries and villages. So that's good. And then down at the bottom of the screen, you find related resources. And so this will have works about Gangsa. So these would be texts that deal with Gangsa and have been labeled by our librarians as such. And so, for instance, here's the, you know, the Kangse Logyu. So of course that's going to be relevant. That's why it comes up first. But click on all, and then you get to see all of the associated records, other places. And so these would be largely the places that are contained within Gangsa. But then there's those two works that deal with it. And then there's even a person who was born there, and so is labeled. And this would be, I think, the great author Palmo. And so again, this is a way to navigate through the records. You can see how with Buddha, none of the data from TBRC has been lost. It's just been organized in new ways. So that's Gangsa. Then, so yeah, what I wanted to point out there was how you can, you know, from one search get into the records from different aspects of the database, and therefore pretty much span everything that we have about that place. Then someone asked about Gyalrong, and so let me search on that. So this is Gyalrong in far eastern Tibet. Let's search under places. We started with Gangsa because that's a named modern county, so it's quite well documented. Whereas Gyalrong, it's you know, it's a traditional designation, if you look on a modern map, there's no one place called Gyalrong. So searching for things about Gyalrong require a little bit more finesse in your searches. But because it is such an important cultural area of Tibet, of course, there is a place record for it in the database. So here we search on Gyalrong. Great, and we see that, you know, there's lots of resources and so forth. But what I want to point out is that it has these alternate names, Gyalmo Tsawarong, and also just Tsawarong. So if you search on Gyalrong, you know, you will find, you know, a lot of hits, but then always look for the variant labels and search on those as well. So it's labeled as a canyon. I don't think that's exactly right. We can fix that. More of a deep valley or system of valleys tells you everything that's contained within it, and then works about Gyalrong and so forth. So that's about the same. But then what we can do here is go back to the search results, and then let's search for Gyalrong on e-texts. So we now have 4,000 new full text e-texts in the database. And so right now when you search on places, it doesn't call up instances of your search within e-text. So you'll always have to search on those independently. Don't forget, of course, it will, well, hopefully it will return a lot of relevant results, as it does here. So 330 results of Gyalrong. And you see the results in context. That's wonderful. And then you think, okay, there's Gyalrong, that's great, but you know, let me try Gyalmo Tsawarong, because maybe the really, you know, illuminating mention of this place is going to occur in a text that names it as Gyalmo Tsawarong. So again, I just wanted to point out some of the sort of hacks that you need to do to get the most out of the database. We can't, it would just take too much time for us to go in and pre-search on Gyalmo Tsawarong is equal to Gyalrong and so forth. You know, that's something that maybe we'll have to wait for AI to do. But in the meantime, always search on these variants. I know that the power users in the audience don't need to be told that, but sometimes graduate students need that kind of advice. So those were two searches. Someone asked how to search within Colophons, and we don't offer Colophons as a facet because it's not necessary. When you search within versions, it searches within the Colophons if we have transcribed them. We don't transcribe all Colophons, but we often do, especially for the important texts. And so if you are searching on something and it appears in a Colophon, it will come up. So let's see if here's an example. All right, so we have the Tercha of Sasum Lingpa, and this is a transcribed Colophon. Gyalmo Tsawarong shows up, and so you get it. So again, searching on Colophons, you're doing it even though you might not know it. Let's go to the actual record. Oh, where does it appear? So which text was it? Or is it this one? Let's see more. Well, at any rate, that's how it works. All right, and then another question. So someone said, I'm going to finish a chapter on Torgut Kalmuk monks traveling between early modern Tibet and Russia. I use the keywords. But I wonder if there are more records in the database on this, the new database. So everything that was part of the TBRC database is now on BDRC. Nothing was left out. But the BDRC database is much more expansive, in part because we now are federating our searches out to a number of different really important institutions. British Library, Internet Archive, Cambridge, Ngmpp, and so forth. But then the e-texts also, the 4,000 new e-texts are also, adding significantly to the database, and therefore to the informative results that you'll get back. So while Russia and Mongolia are not my specialties, I would invite the person who asked for that to not only search on say Urusu as a topic and a place, but also search under e-text for that, and hopefully you'll get a lot more results. Another person asked about how they can find Mongolian monks who studied at Drepung. This is the kind of thing that at present, we're not able to document in the database. So we don't often, we simply don't label people's ethnicities or places of origin. We do have their birthplace, but we don't, you can't search on, say, a Mongolian person who happened to study in Drepung. And even studying in Drepung is a little bit complicated. But through various hacks, you can get at this. So we have thousands of person records. Not all of the persons we have in the database are authors, which is fantastic. Sometimes if there's a famous Lama, we'll go through their biography and then create records for all of their students, even if some of these students never wrote texts, at least texts that we have in the database. So what I would say to that person is, do searches on all the famous Mongolian lamas and geshes who studied at Drepung. Go to their person records and look at the students that are associated with them. And that might help you find people that you didn't yet know about. And then you'll have to maybe search on eText or other resources entirely to help with that. I know that Treasury of Lives is now expanding into Mongolia and more deeply into Inner Asia. Every time they come up with person records that we don't have, we integrate them into the database. So slowly we'll have that. But there's some types of very sort of organic searches that just we don't have the time to model. And that would be something like, I want to know all Mongolians who happen to study at Drepung and not other monasteries. So there are some limits, but because of the comprehensiveness of the data, and now with all of the full texts that we have, with some interesting searches, I hope that you'll find at least some of what you're looking for. So maybe I'll leave it at that, because it's after the top of the hour now. Perhaps we can move on to a Q&A session.
Yeah. Wow, great. Thank you so much, Jan and Ellie. That's just so amazing. I'm really, as you can tell, lacking words to describe how exciting this all is, these changes, and how much this is going to revolutionize the field. I'm just so impressed. So in the remaining time, we want to take some questions from our participants here. So if anyone has a question for Jan or Ellie, please speak up. Raise your hand or unmute yourself and speak. I think you can unmute yourselves.
We'll turn off the recording now. Is that right, Francis?
Sure, yeah.